My neighbor brought me cookies. Her husband had been secretly dumping construction waste in my woods for 2 years. I'm still kind of shaking as I type this out. I, 50M, have lived in this house for 11 years. It's a rural property, about 4 acres, and the back third of it is wooded. I don't go back there much in the winter, or even much in the fall. It's dense, and there's not a great reason to unless I'm doing some clearing or checking on the fence line. Last Saturday I decided to walk the full property because I'm thinking about putting up a deer stand before season opens. I had my coffee, it was a nice morning, and I was just kind of enjoying it. Then, about 200 feet into the tree line, I almost tripped over a chunk of concrete. A big, broken slab of it. I thought, okay, weird, maybe it got pushed back here when the previous owners did something years ago. Whatever. Except then I kept walking, and there was more. There's a whole area back there, maybe 40 by 20 feet, that is just absolutely buried in construction debris. Broken drywall, concrete chunks, old lumber with nails still in it, what looks like sections of old subfloor, some kind of insulation batting, PVC pipe pieces, a busted-up vanity cabinet. Just an absolute pile of garbage that somebody has been systematically dumping back there. I stood there for probably 10 minutes just trying to figure out what I was looking at. My first thought was that maybe it had been there since before I bought the place. But the drywall isn't weathered enough for that. Some of this stuff looks like it's from the past year or two at most. Then I started looking at the ground around it, and there are tire tracks. Clear ones. Coming from the direction of the property line on my east side. My east side neighbor is a guy named Dale. Dale is 58, a retired contractor, and he has been renovating his house in phases for the past 3 years or so. I've watched him haul materials in, seen the dumpsters in his driveway, and said hello to him across the fence maybe 100 times. He's always seemed fine. A little quiet. His wife Karen is friendlier. She brought over cookies when my mom visited last Thanksgiving. I walked the fence line. There is a section of my back fence, a post and rail thing that's mostly decorative back there, where 2 rails have been pulled out and then loosely replaced. You'd never notice it unless you were looking. The tire tracks come right through that gap. I took about 60 photos. I walked the area twice. Then I went home, sat in my kitchen, and just kept thinking about the timeline. 3 years of renovation. 2 years worth of debris at minimum, based on what I was seeing. This guy has been driving through my fence, dumping his construction waste on my land, putting the fence rails back, and going home. Over and over again. While waving at me across the yard, I didn't say anything to him that day. I wanted to think first. Here's the thing about revenge that I'm not proud of, my brain went there almost immediately. Not like, hurt anyone, nothing like that. But I started thinking about what I actually have here. I've got tire tracks. I've got debris that I can probably match to his renovation work if I look at what he's had done. I've got a gap in my fence that he made. And I've got, after about an hour of Googling, something called illegal dumping, which in my state is a criminal misdemeanor for small amounts and can go up to a felony for larger volumes. The amount back there? I don't know exactly. But it's a lot. I also found out that disposal of construction debris in my state has specific regulations, and that contractors, even retired ones doing their own work, are supposed to use licensed facilities. There are fines. There are environmental considerations if any of the materials are hazardous, and some of what I'm seeing back there could qualify. So I have options. I could go knock on his door right now and confront him. I could call the county. I could call a lawyer. I could document everything further and then decide. Or I could do something that a part of me is embarrassed to admit I started planning before I even finished my second cup of coffee. I have a buddy, Mike, who works for the county assessor's office. Not code enforcement, but he knows those people. I texted him a few of the photos without explaining much and just said, hypothetically, what is this situation? He called me back in about 4 minutes. Where is this? He said. My property. Jesus. You know who did it? I think so. He was quiet for a second. You want to do this quietly or loudly? And that's the question, isn't it? Because here's what I haven't told you yet. Dale is not just my neighbor. Dale's brother-in-law is on the town planning board. And 3 months ago, I submitted a request for a variance to build a detached garage on my property, and it got denied. Denied for reasons that felt thin at the time. I didn't push it because it wasn't worth a fight over a garage. But now I'm sitting here wondering if those two things are connected. And I don't know if I'm being paranoid or if I'm finally seeing something clearly that I should have seen a long time ago. Mike said he'd make some calls. He said, don't confront him yet, don't move anything, don't touch anything. Then he said something that I keep turning over in my head. If this is what it looks like, you've got more leverage than you realize. The question is what you want to do with it. What do I want to do with it? I want the debris gone and I want to be paid for it. I want my garage variance approved. I want Dale to have to look me in the eye and explain himself. I want Karen's cookie tin to feel a little less warm in my memory, because right now it just feels like part of the cover. But I also know that going scorched earth on a neighbor you have to live next to for potentially another decade is complicated. I know that once you do certain things, you can't undo them. And I know that I'm pissed off enough right now that I probably shouldn't be making permanent decisions. I took Monday off work. I drove out to the back of my property again with a measuring tape and a notepad. I measured the rough dimensions of the dump site. I photographed the tire tracks again after it rained Sunday night. They were even clearer. I found something I'd missed the first time, a piece of drywall with a pencil notation on it, what looks like measurements written in contractor shorthand, and a partial word that might be a room name. Mr. is what it says. Master. As in master bedroom. As in the master bedroom renovation I watched Dale do last spring, when I remember him pulling out what he said was original 1970s drywall. I kept that piece separate. Photographed it a dozen times. Mike texted me Tuesday morning, "Call me when you can. Found something." I called him on my lunch break. "So your neighbor," he said. "Has he done any permitted work in the last 3 years?" I assume so. He had a dumpster, he had contractors and sometimes. I pulled the permits. There are 2. Small ones. His total renovation, based on what you described to me, should have generated a lot more debris than 2 small permits would account for. And here's the thing. He paused. His brother-in-law on the planning board? That guy also signed off as a secondary reviewer on one of Dale's permits. Which is not technically illegal, but it's not great. I didn't say anything for a second. "Your variance denial," Mike said. "I'm not saying anything officially. But I'd look at who was in the room for that decision. I'm writing this out tonight because I genuinely don't know what my next move is. I have a meeting with a property attorney on Thursday. I have photos, measurements, a piece of drywall that might have Dale's handwriting on it, and a guy at the assessor's office who is being carefully helpful in a way that makes me think there's more he knows and isn't saying yet." Dale waved at me from his driveway this morning when I was leaving for work. I waved back. I don't know how I kept a straight face, but I did. Thursday can't come soon enough. Update 1. Okay, so Thursday happened, and I have a lot to unpack. The attorney's name is Patrice, and she came recommended by a guy I used to work with who went through a nightmare boundary dispute about 4 years ago. I wasn't sure what to expect, but she was sharp as hell and she didn't waste time being gentle about any of it. I spread everything out on her conference table. The photos, the measurements, the screenshots of the permit records Mike had pointed me toward, and the separate photographs of the drywall piece with Mr. written on it. She went through all of it slowly and didn't say much while she was looking. Then she leaned back and said, "Tell me about the variance denial." So I walked her through it. The request, the timeline, the denial letter, which I had brought because I dug it out of a filing cabinet the night before. She read the denial letter twice. "The stated reason is sightline impact on adjacent properties," she said. "Yeah, which I always thought was thin, because the garage was going on the west side of my house, not the east side facing Dale." She set the letter down. "Who signed this?" I pointed to the name. She wrote it down. "And this is the same individual your contact at the assessor's office mentioned in connection with Dale's permits?" "That's what Mike indicated, yeah." She tapped her pen on the table a few times. "I want to be clear with you about what I can and can't do here, and what the realistic outcomes look like, because people come in here sometimes expecting a movie and what they get is paperwork." I told her I understood that. "What you have is strong on the dumping. Civil liability is real, cleanup costs are recoverable, and depending on what's in that debris, there could be environmental exposure that complicates things further for him. The criminal piece is possible, but you don't control that. The county does, and whether they pursue it depends on a lot of factors that have nothing to do with you." "What about the planning board connection?" She was quiet for a second. "That's murkier. The connection between your denial and Dale's brother-in-law is suggestive, but it's not proof of anything coordinated. People serve on planning boards with relatives in town. It happens. It's not automatically corrupt. What you'd need to show is that there was actual communication, an actual decision made because of that relationship, and that's hard to prove. So basically I can nail him on the dumping and the planning board thing is a dead end." I didn't say that. She picked up her pen again. "I said it's murkier. If there was communication, there might be a record of it. Emails, texts, planning board meeting minutes, recusal records, or the absence of recusal records where there should be one. That's not nothing. But pursuing it means filing complaints with the state ethics board, potentially, and that process is slow and public and it will make you a known adversary of people who have some local influence. I'm already their adversary. I just don't know it yet officially." She almost smiled at that. "Fair point." We talked for another 40 minutes. The plan she recommended was to send Dale a formal demand letter first, before involving the county, giving him a specific window to respond. The logic being that if he responds and tries to settle quietly, we learn something about what he's willing to do to keep this contained. If he doesn't respond or gets aggressive, we have documentation showing that we tried to resolve it and he refused. She also said something that I've been sitting with ever since I left her office. The leverage you have is real, she said. But leverage is only useful if you're willing to use it all the way. If you threaten and then flinch, you've handed him information about where your limits are. So before we do anything, I need to know, are you prepared to go all the way with this if it comes to that? I told her I'd think about it. I drove home and Dale's truck was in his driveway. The lights were on in the back of his house. Karen's little herb garden is still sitting on their porch from summer, some of the plants dead now, and I don't know why that detail keeps sticking in my head. Mike texted me that night. He said he'd talked to a friend in code enforcement purely socially, and that the friend had mentioned they'd been getting some anonymous tips lately about unpermitted work in our township and that the department was being more proactive than usual about following up. I didn't ask Mike what he meant by that. I just texted back noted and left it there. The demand letter goes out Monday. Certified mail. I'm supposed to hear back from Patrice by end of day Friday with the final draft. I haven't waved at Dale since Thursday. Update 2. It's been 9 days since the demand letter was delivered, and I want to update because things have moved faster than I expected in some ways and slower in others, and I'm still trying to figure out what I'm actually looking at. Dale signed for the letter on Monday. I know this because certified mail gives you a delivery confirmation, and I checked it probably 15 times that day. Patrice had given him 14 days to respond. He responded in 4, not through an attorney. He called my cell phone. I didn't recognize the number at first, so I picked up. This is Dale. I didn't say anything for probably 3 full seconds. I was at work, sitting at my desk, and I had this weird out-of-body moment where I thought about all the times I'd waved at this man across a fence. I got your letter, he said. Okay. I want to talk about this. My attorney's contact information is on the letter. I'd rather talk to you directly. Neighbor to neighbor. And here's where I made a decision that Patrice is probably going to be annoyed about. I said, I'm listening. He talked for about 6 minutes. He was calm, which I didn't expect. He said he knew what he'd done was wrong. He used that word, wrong. Not a mistake, not an accident. Wrong. He said he'd started doing it because a contractor had bailed on him partway through a job, leaving him with debris and no easy disposal option, and he'd made a bad choice. He said it had gotten away from him. He said Karen didn't know. I want to make this right, he said. I'll pay for the cleanup. Whatever it costs. I don't want lawyers involved. I said, Dale, there are going to be lawyers involved. He was quiet. The question, I said, and I surprised myself with how steady my voice was, is what else gets involved? Another pause. What does that mean? It means I found the drywall piece with your measurements on it. It means I know about the permits. It means I have questions about my variance denial that I'm starting to want answers to. I could hear him breathing. That's not, he started. Those are 2 separate things. Are they? He didn't answer that. Dale, I'm going to hang up now. Have your attorney contact mine. That's how this works. And I hung up. Then I sat at my desk for about 10 minutes doing absolutely nothing, because my hands were shaking a little and I needed them to stop before I did anything else. I called Patrice and told her about the conversation. She was quiet for a moment, then said, You held the line better than most people do. Which I think was her version of not yelling at me for picking up in the first place. She said the fact that he'd called personally and admitted wrongdoing, even vaguely, was significant. She told me, don't call him back, don't text him, don't talk to him over the fence. I told her I understood. His attorney contacted her the next day. Here's where it gets interesting, and also where I realize I may have underestimated a few things. His attorney reached out, and the first thing they said was that Dale was prepared to be cooperative regarding the property matter, but that he hoped any resolution could remain private. According to Patrice, the phrase remain private appeared twice. She said, he's scared. That phrase means he's scared. She also told me that code enforcement had apparently been out to inspect the dump site. She said she didn't know who had initiated it, but that the county now had their own independent record of the site, separate from anything I'd filed. I have a pretty good guess who initiated that. The cleanup estimate came in yesterday. A licensed debris removal company, the kind you're required to use for construction waste disposal in my state, quoted just under $9,000 for full remediation and proper disposal, including any materials that might need special handling. Patrice is asking for the $9,000, plus her fees, plus a figure that accounts for 2 years of unauthorized use of my land. Dale's attorney hasn't responded to that yet. I drove past my back fence line last night just to look at it. The gap where the rails were pulled out. I've got it blocked now with some old cattle panels from my barn, nothing permanent, just enough to keep anything else from getting through while this is ongoing. Dale was outside when I got back to my truck. He was standing in his side yard, not doing anything, just standing there. He looked at me. I looked at him. Neither of us said a word. I got in my truck and drove around to my driveway. Karen's herb garden pots are gone from the porch now. I don't know when they disappeared. Update 3. I don't even know how to write this one out in a way that makes it land right, so I'm just going to go in order. Patrice called me on a Wednesday morning, which she doesn't usually do, she usually emails. She said, "Are you somewhere you can talk?" I stepped outside my office building into the parking lot. "Dale's attorney called this morning," she said. "They want to expand the scope of the settlement conversation." What does that mean? It means Dale apparently wants to put more on the table than just the cleanup costs. She explained it. Dale had apparently spent the days since our phone call doing some kind of internal calculation and had decided that what scared him most wasn't the civil liability. What scared him most was the permit situation, the planning board connection, and what an ethics complaint or a code enforcement escalation might do to his brother-in-law specifically. The brother-in-law's name is Gary. Gary has been on the planning board for 6 years. Gary apparently has ambitions, according to Mike, who I called after I got off with Patrice, ambitions being a polite word for the fact that Gary has been positioning himself for a run at a county commissioner seat in the next election cycle. A formal ethics complaint, even one that goes nowhere, is public record. It's a story. It's a thing that exists and can be found. Dale is offering to cover full remediation costs. He's offering to pay Patrice's fees. And he has apparently indicated that Gary would be willing to revisit my variance application through proper channels, with full recusal from Gary himself this time. I sat with that for a long time. I called Mike after I got off with Patrice. "Did you know Gary was going to run for commissioner?" I asked him. Mike was quiet for a beat. "I may have heard something like that." "And you didn't think that was relevant to mention?" "I thought," he said carefully, "that you'd figure out what was relevant when you needed to." I'm not mad at Mike. I think he was playing a longer game than he let on, and I think he believed he was helping me, and honestly, maybe he was. But I also feel like I've been a chess piece in something I didn't fully understand, and I'm still working out how I feel about that. Patrice's read is that the offer is real. She thinks Dale is genuinely panicked about Gary's exposure and that this isn't a negotiating opener, it's close to their ceiling. She said I could push for more money, but that I should think carefully about whether doing so changes what Gary does with the variance, because there's no way to legally bind a planning board vote. The variance, she said, is being offered as a gesture of good faith, not as a contractual obligation. That distinction matters. So I have to decide if I trust the gesture. The honest answer is I don't trust Dale. I don't trust Gary. I didn't know either of them well enough to trust them before any of this, and I certainly don't now. But I also want my garage. I've wanted that garage for 3 years. And I want the debris gone. And I want to stop spending the next 2 years in litigation with my next door neighbor. What I don't want is to accept a settlement and then watch Gary find some other thin reason to deny me again once the pressure is off. I told Patrice I needed a few days. She said, "Take them." But I'd move before the week is out. Dale hasn't been outside when I've come and gone this week. His truck is there, but I haven't seen him. I don't know if he's avoiding me, or if it's coincidence, or if he's just inside doing whatever normal retired contractors do when they're waiting to find out how badly they've burned their own life down. I genuinely don't know what I'm going to do. Part of me wants to file the ethics complaint just to file it, not even for leverage at this point, just because Gary used a planning board seat to do a favor for his brother-in-law, and that actually makes me angry in a way that's completely separate from everything else. That's not about me and my garage. That's just a thing that shouldn't be allowed to happen to anyone. But I also know that if I blow this up, I still live next to these people. However this ends, I live here. I've got until Friday to give Patrice an answer. Update 4. I gave Patrice my answer on Thursday, because I couldn't make it to Friday. I told her I'd accept the settlement on the remediation costs and fees, but that I wanted 2 things in writing that weren't on the table yet. First, a signed acknowledgement from Dale, not just his attorney, that he accessed my property without permission and deposited debris there. Not vague, not the undersigned acknowledges a property dispute. I wanted it to say what he actually did. Second, I wanted the variance reapplication process to begin within 60 days of the settlement being signed, with documentation showing Gary's formal recusal from the process. Patrice said the first condition was unusual but achievable. She said the second was, in her words, threading a needle, because you can't compel a planning board outcome in a settlement agreement. But you can document the recusal. And if the variance gets denied again after a clean recusal, At least I'll know it's a real denial and not a political one, and I can fight it on the actual merits. Dale's attorney came back within 2 days. They accepted both conditions. The signed acknowledgement is going to exist. It's going to have his name on it. It won't be public the way a court judgment would be, but it's real and it's documented, and if he ever does something like this to someone else and they need to know his history, I have it. Remediation is scheduled for the 3rd week of next month. The company comes in, removes everything, disposes of it properly, and Dale pays the invoice directly. I haven't filed an ethics complaint against Gary. I made that choice consciously, and I'm still not completely at peace with it. The argument I made to myself is that the recusal requirement essentially corrects the specific wrong he did to me, and that filing a complaint purely as leverage, or purely as punishment, without new evidence of broader corruption, is a different thing than filing one to address an actual ongoing problem. I don't know if that reasoning fully holds up, or if I'm just tired. Probably some of both. Mike bought me a beer last weekend. We sat at the bar and he said, "You did all right." "You could have told me about Gary earlier," I said. "I could have," he said. He didn't apologize, and I didn't ask him to. I saw Dale on Saturday. He was getting his mail. I was pulling into my driveway. We made eye contact. He didn't wave. I didn't wave. He went inside. I don't know what I expected to feel in that moment. I think I expected something cleaner than what I actually felt. I got most of what I wanted. The debris is going to be gone. I'm going to get a real shot at my variance. He signed a piece of paper admitting what he did. By any reasonable measure, that's a result. But he still lives 40 feet from my property line. Karen still lives there. I don't know if she really didn't know, or if that was just something Dale said to make himself seem less calculated. I keep going back and forth on that one. She seemed like a genuinely nice person, and I don't know what to do with that information now. The variance reapplication window opens in about 6 weeks. I've already pulled my original plans out and I'm going through them with a contractor friend to see if there's anything worth adjusting before I refile. The garage is going on the west side of the house, away from Dale, exactly where I always wanted it. I'll update when the remediation happens, and again when the variance goes through the board. If it goes through. It should. It should have the first time. Hi there, if you made it so far. Consider dropping a like and maybe subscribing. Thanks. And have a nice one.